Good morning, everyone. I'm State Representative Jillian Gilchrist, and I'm joined by colleagues in the House and Senate, along with advocates who are committed to preventing gun violence in our state. And we're here today to call for an excise tax on ammunition to increase funding for gun violence prevention and reduction. In addition to my esteemed speakers, we are joined by State Representative Jonathan Steinberg and State Representative Josh Hall, as well as Moms Demand Action, Connecticut Against Gun Violence, the Newtown Action Alliance, and Representative Reyes. The overwhelming majority of gun violence takes place in Connecticut's 4 largest cities: Bridgeport, Waterbury, New Haven, and Hartford. These are mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, sons, and daughters who are being shot to death, and many more are left wounded and physically disabled. Despite being woefully underfunded, the organizations you will hear from today are working to save these communities. While lawmakers down on Capitol Hill tweet out those thoughts and prayers, it's these folks who are at the hospital, in the streets, and comforting the devastated victims of gun violence. Beyond the emotional cost, gun violence has a financial cost. According to a recent congressional report, gun violence is costing us $1.2 billion annually. That comes out to $333 for every Connecticut resident, and that doesn't even take into account the millions of dollars that Connecticut has spent to increase security at our public schools, our public buildings, and our places of worship. So when I hear groups like the NRA say that this proposal punishes law-abiding gun owners, I say shame on you. Those being punished are the victims of gun violence from Hartford to Newtown. There are teachers and our children. There are police officers, our first responders, and our ER doctors. They are the 84% of us law-abiding residents who don't own guns, but are paying for them physically, emotionally, and financially. A 35% excise tax will be used in a non-lapsing account to fund evidence-based programming to prevent urban gun violence, like the work you will hear about today. Any revenue not spent for those purposes can be used to increase security at places of worship or to offset any of the other costs associated with gun violence. Connecticut's provided some funding here and there, but we have never comprehensively invested in preventing urban gun violence until now. I call on all lawmakers, not just those standing with me here today, to be brave, to be bold, and to help us set an example for other states to follow. I am now so pleased, I'll give him a minute because I see he just got here, to welcome up our first group of speakers, Senator Doug McCrory and Majority Leader State Representative Matt Ritter.
Thanks, John. Come on. We'll give Doug a chance to get settled there. I know there's a lot of people here. I want to thank everybody who's here today and the groups who help organize around these issues. I particularly want to thank Representative Gilchrist for organizing this event and having the courage to put something like out this public. This will get a lot of attention from folks, as you referenced, probably some negative from people, but these are the conversations that we have to have. We're very lucky in Connecticut from the sense that we have been a leader on these guns issues for almost a decade now. And a lot of the folks to my left and my right have been on the ground, have been advocating for those laws. But there's more that we can do. And some people might be asking themselves, what is an excise tax? Why an excise tax? What does that do? Government levies excise taxes for things that we sell legally but can have a detrimental impact on society. You could think about alcohol, for example. You could think about ammunition in this particular case. And the specifics of a bill, you can negotiate. You can negotiate what that tax would be. You can negotiate whom it applies to and where it applies to. But the underlying reality is that if we had more money for preventative programs, we'd have less funerals, we'd have less wakes, we'd have less tragedies in the cities that we represent. I think that's why you see Waterbury here today, and you see Hartford well represented. I know New Haven and Bridgeport like to be here if they could. It's a busy time. But remember what the goal is, not simply to punish anybody, as Jillian said. It's not to be retaliatory against anybody. It is to fund programs in the cities that we represent. You know, there's a common misconception up here that little leagues and playgrounds and fields are pork. They're pork for Democrats to pass projects. I remind folks in the chamber all the time that in the city of Hartford, when our football teams make a playoff game, there is not a field for those kids to play in that is regulation. So when we fight for dollars for these programs, it's not pork. It actually impacts the daily lives of our children. After-school programming is not pork, ladies and gentlemen. That is real stuff that affects real lives and keeps kids safe and off the streets. So we'll continue that fight. I'm proud to stand here with everybody, and I'm really honored to introduce my colleague and my state senator, Doug McCord. Thanks, Doug.
Well, again, thanks for everyone having this press conference, my representatives, my colleagues. And like was said, you know, some people might think like this is extreme, a 35% excise tax. And personally myself, who is a gun owner, I understand that this can cause a problem for most people who want to purchase ammunition. But the real goal is here is to raise funds, to raise money for programs that will prevent our people who are suffering from so much violence in our communities. We have to get at the head of this early. If we can continue to provide support for programs for our young people at a very early age, we won't be here on the tail end of a situation that might occur. It's incumbent upon us to make sure that we have these conversations in this bill. What will this bill consist of? We don't know, but it's a negotiation point. It's a starting point, because as a state, we have to get control of this. We cannot continue to have cities, and not just cities, communities suffer from violence. And a majority of this violence is handguns. So I'm here to support this piece of legislation, and I'm here to support all these people here, some of them I know personally, who've been affected by gun violence, violence that could be prevented. We've passed a number of bills since I've been here in regards to guns, and we're not trying to take guns out of anybody's hand. What we're trying to do is provide communities and peoples and families opportunities at a very early age for success. So with that said, again, I'm lending my credibility, if I have any in this issue at this point, to this measure, because I think it's extremely, extremely important. I know for a fact, representing the city of Hartford, that I know young people can tell me it's easy to get a handgun than to get a loaf of bread or some lettuce. They have access to handguns faster than they have access for fresh meat. And that's a shit, in my opinion, that's a sin and a shame in the year of 2020 in the capital city of Connecticut. So again, Representative Ritter, you want to call it the next group?
Yeah, Jillian, you want to take over from this? Yeah,
Sure.
all right. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Majority Leader. Next up, we will hear from Chelsea Parsons with the Center for American Progress.
Go ahead, Chelsea.
Good morning. Again, my name is Chelsea Parsons, and I am the Vice President of Gun Violence Prevention Policy at the Center for American Progress, which is a DC-based progressive think tank. I'm so pleased to be here this morning to support the introduction of this bill, which will provide crucial funding to support programs that we're going to hear about that we know save lives. Taxing ammunition is not a new idea. The federal government has had a tax on ammunition since 1941. But an oddity of that federal law is that none of the funds generated by the tax on ammunition can actually be spent on the programs designed to prevent gun violence. So this bill is intended to address that stunning gap in the federal law. And this is a modest proposal that will generate life-saving revenue for Connecticut communities. Legislation like this has been introduced in other jurisdictions around the country, in Seattle, in Cook County, Illinois. And these laws, it will not surprise you, have already been challenged. They've been tested in court, and courts have uniformly upheld them, finding that this kind of tax imposes no burden on the exercise of an individual's Second Amendment rights. I don't need to tell anybody in this room that gun violence has devastated far too many of Connecticut's communities. And this state has some of the strongest gun laws in the entire nation. In my work, I hold up Connecticut as an example of a state with strong gun laws. But we know that gun laws by themselves are not enough to solve this problem. And what we need is a dedicated investment in evidence-based programs that we know are effective at reducing violence and saving lives. And so I'm so pleased to be here to offer my support for this legislation, which represents a significant step forward in doing precisely that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea. And now we will hear from some of the folks who are doing this work day in and day out. So I'd like to welcome up Leonard Jihad of Connecticut Intervention.
Hi, good morning. No, every bullet has a story, and every gunshot that occurs in our urban communities has a narrative of despair, of depression, and of trauma. And we know that the only thing worse than trauma is untreated trauma in our communities. There is evidence. There's evidence-based programs that work. Restorative practices work. Mediation works. Cognitive behavioral therapy works. But we usually wait until someone gets in trouble, and then we give them cognitive behavioral therapy programs, motivational enhancement therapy programs. In my prior life as chief probation officer in New Haven, we give assessments, and we understand that this age group, I'm talking 13 to 21, they score highest in the domains of attitude, peer group, negative peer group, and also family dysfunction. And if we can attack those issues, we have a better chance for success. So back in 2006, when they did the Raise the Age initiative, there was a 60% recidivism rate with a new violent crime within the first 6 months of this age group. If we address these issues like we did back in 2006, it went from 60% to 0. And we did this right here in Connecticut. So upon retirement, I took over the Street Outreach Worker Program in New Haven, and we did great work in New Haven. And last year, we were blessed with a building. So it's type of like a field of dreams type of thing. If you build it, they will come. And the youth have come. They've come to the building every day. We mandate tutoring for them, and then we ask them what they want. They said, we want a music studio so we can make music, and then they also game after they finish doing their tutoring. What we learned really quickly, after we shut the studio down to make it pretty, we painted, we redid the floors and everything, there was nothing for the kids to do. They went back to the streets, and they went back to violent crime again. So programs like this work. Programs like Compass in Hartford work. Street Safe in Bridgeport, they work. But we need funding. We need assistance. We need support. And I congratulate Senator Gilchrist on championing this issue, because we know that left undone or left not affected like we've done in the past, we're going to continue to get the same results. So I'm hoping that we can make this change and we can support the children of Connecticut. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonard. Next up, I'd like to introduce Deborah Davis with Mothers United Against Violence.
Thank you so much. This is truly a first step. On behalf of Mothers United Against Violence, we first want to thank you for bringing this forth, because as we are few on the front line, Mothers United Against Violence has been around since 2003. Frontline warriors trying to help to prevent some of the gun violence that we have in the city of Hartford. And as you know, the city of Hartford has some of the most atrocious and blighted areas in this state. And so we are not only looking at how we can prevent the gun violence, because we know the conditions of what individuals live in. And we know that part of that is the condition of coming out to see the blighted buildings, the streets that have not been paved, and everything around it is contributed to basically some of the major violence that we have in the city of Hartford. But Mothers United Against Violence, we absolutely are with the families. We are with the young people that are actually shot. We are on the prevention side. We help with the hospitals in terms of going there to make sure that we can provide some intervention if possible. We also are there to make sure that they get the resources that they have never gotten since 2003 or since for quite a long time. So part of this effort is major for us. We can see some of the resources that would truly bring some support to cities and urban areas that really absolutely need it because they haven't had it. We represent the underserved. We represent the individuals that also have value. We don't represent just the urban. We represent everyone. But the most important thing is that we can concentrate and provide some of those resources that would be the residuals from this legislation to help offset some of the pain, some of the trauma, some of the other areas that is so important. With gun violence comes everything else. And I don't know if you've thought, and I know you have, mental health is key. We haven't been able to tackle mental health in our communities. And so we are basically really wanting to make sure that we stay on the front line of that as well. So this is really key for us. This will help to provide those resources, the resources that we so absolutely need. And I know we're few and far between, but we're out there on the front line. Mothers United Against Violence, thank you so much.
Thank you, Deborah. Next up, I want to invite Aisha Clark with Compass Youth Collaborative.
Good morning. Good morning to the members of the Connecticut General Assembly and all the community members present. Thank you for having us here today. My name is Aisha Clark, as stated, and I'm the Vice President of Operations with Compass Youth Collaborative. We at Compass have a young lady, and her name is Savy, and I would like for you to take a moment to think about and picture her day. While she was sitting at her home doing her homework, and at the front window, she received a phone call. She got up, answered the call, and while she was doing her homework, she moved away, and because there was an altercation outside, a stray bullet went through her window and hit the point in which she was sitting doing her homework. She responded, "If it wasn't for that phone call, I would have been dead." No child should have to endure gun violence or the trauma associated with this type of behavior. The lifetime cost of traumatic injuries estimates at about $466 billion, with $80 billion representing health care costs. At Compass, we do our best to decrease these traumatic injuries by connecting with high-risk youth wherever they are. We wrap our arms around them. We show them that there are caring people out there. We support those like Savy and also those perpetrators to show them that there are people out there that love and care for them. We engage them in relationships to provide them with supports and opportunities to help them become ready, willing, and able to succeed in education, employment, and life. Our peace builders, who know and understand our community, come from our community, provide case management with one-on-one support, groups, and different interventions, and CBT to help support them. We have crisis management, where we are at the hospitals when a crisis happens to support the families and those who have been victimized. We also have out-of-school support to our young people that many have given up on. We are thankful for Representative Gilchrist for crafting such a bill that funds gun violence prevention to support young people like Savy and others who have similar stories. We would love to see this support our amazing peace builders so we can have more of them on the ground and do the work that helps see our young people and have them become safe. Thank you.
And our final speaker of the morning, I'd like to invite up Brent Peterkin from Project Longevity.
Good morning. As Representative Gilchrist stated, my name is Brent Peterkin. I'm the statewide director for Project Longevity. Project Longevity is a criminal justice and community-based initiative that focuses on reducing street group and street gun violence led out of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the state of Connecticut. I'd like to start by expressing my sincere gratitude to Connecticut's General Assembly and our courageous leadership amongst elected officials. It's this kind of courage and bold initiative that keeps me from feeling despondent at times when you work in a business that's associated with death and despair. On Monday, I met with a young man from the P.T. Barnum Apartments in Bridgeport. This young man had been shot multiple times in his abdomen. He had parts of his intestine and stomach removed. He'll face numerous surgeries throughout this year. He'll miss at least a year and a half of work as he recoups from his injuries. He believes that his future is bleak. He believes that there is no hope. The collective that you see in front of you fights against despair, fights against enduring despondency in our communities. We fight against gun violence. We fight to keep hope and aspiration alive in our communities. And we stand boldly alongside our elected officials. Just several weeks ago, also in the city of Bridgeport, there was a shooting during business hours in front of a courthouse. We see this kind of violence, this kind of brazen violence, on a regular basis. It's egregious for this to be occurring in such small cities, and for these cities, Hartford, Bridgeport, and New Haven, and Waterbury, to have such big city problems. I believe that through collaboration and through synergy, through partnership with our elected officials, that we can make an impact. I believe that these problems are not insurmountable, but it requires bold and dedicated effort that will endure so that we can have sustained impact. This tax allows people who purchase ammo in the state of Connecticut to contribute to the cause to reduce gun violence. I don't believe that most gun owners are violent people. I believe that most gun owners are law-abiding citizens who just simply want to protect their home or protect themselves or love the sport of shooting or hunting. But as I speak to gun owners throughout the state of Connecticut, they also express deep angst about what they see going on in our cities. The long-standing community-level gun violence that has plagued these communities for decades, longer than I've been alive. This is their opportunity to contribute to that effort. We know that the state will get a return on its investment. We know that the cost of gun violence per victim is something that hampers the state budget and ultimately is paid for by the taxpayers. Support this coalition, support this effort to pass this sales tax on ammunition in the state of Connecticut. It's the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do, it's the courageous thing to do, but most importantly, it's the most impassioned and loving thing that you can do to save lives. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our speakers and to everyone who came out today, who does the really hard work on the front lines. We are happy to answer any questions. Great question. So as you know, the process unfolds, but as proposed, it would be an excise tax on ammunition both bought in stores and online.
So last time we did talk about, the added tax to cigarettes because, it causes cancer. We added tax to sugar-free drinks because, they cause obesity. You talked a little bit about that negative perception that you might receive on this. I'm sure you're not trying to say, gun owners cause gun violence. Can you kind of explain where you get the idea to tax all gun owners in the nation?
Sure. So as I mentioned, all of us, gun owners and non-gun owners, are currently paying the cost of gun violence. So it is costing us $1.2 billion annually, $333 per person. And so guns do cause gun violence. And so we are asking for those who purchase ammunition to pay a little extra. And when we're talking about this, a box of 50 bullets for a handgun goes for about $10.99 to $15.99. So we're only really talking about $3.50 to $5 extra. But that revenue can do tremendous work to prevent gun violence in our urban settings.
How do we use the number of 35% versus another number of 20%?
So as again was mentioned, this is a starting point. I'm happy to have that conversation, but in looking at other communities across the country who are investing in preventing urban gun violence, they're spending as much as $27 million out in Oakland, which actually is the size of our 4 cities, and so we could be asking for a lot more. So 35%, based on the Office of Fiscal Analysis, we would bring in around $7 million annually. There are $25 million in ammunition sales annually in the state of Connecticut.
Would this also be subject to the state policing of providing ammunition or local municipalities?
Great question. So the bill that I introduced, the language was not included in there, but this is not intended to impact law enforcement, corrections officers, or military personnel using ammunition in their position.
So they would not have to go to that?
Correct. Again, has to work its way through the process, but that is my intent. Any additional questions? Thank you all for being here.